Today, we are going to focus on MLA in text citations. At this point, you should already know what a works cited page is. A works cited page, just as a refresher, in MLA is a list of sources that you plan to use or that you have used in your essay. And that is the last page of your essay. So we are going to use this works cited page kind of as a guide and as an example as we discuss what in-text citations are and how to do them. So just to begin, what is an in-text citation? It is a reference in the body of your essay to one of the sources on your works cited page. So essentially, we cannot just have a works cited page. That's not enough to give credit to our sources. Instead, throughout the essay, as we utilize the sources that we found, we have to give credit. Now, when do we use them? We provide an in-text citation when we quote from a source. So a quote is when you use the source's exact words. So for instance, if I have a website and I have a sentence that I want to use directly from that source, I would quote that source. So I may say something like, according to research, comma, space, quote, and then I would have the material I'm quoting. So I may say something like, a symptom of the common cold is a cough. And then I would have a citation here. And I'm going to show you how to format these in just a moment, but I will put a placeholder in there. And we'll discuss kind of what that is in just a second. So these would have been the exact words from that source. So I would need to, first of all, I need to cite them, like I said, but I also need to make sure I enclose them in quote marks. Because if you use exact words from a source, and you do not put quote marks around them, that would be plagiarism, even if you provided an in-text citation, because you would be taking credit for those words and the ideas. So you want to be sure to carefully punctuate and cite your quotations. You also need to provide an in-text citation when you paraphrase from a source. So when you paraphrase, it's when you put a portion of text from a source into your own words. So we still need to give credit. We still need to use an in-text citation there because we are taking someone's ideas and putting them into our essay. So that would look something like this in your essay. One of the main symptoms that people experience when they have a cold is a persistent cough. And then I would have my citation. So you'll notice a paraphrase is not enclosed in quotation marks, but I do still have this, which is an in-text citation afterwards. And what that tells my audience is that this sentence, I have put in my own words, but the ideas came from this source. Now, what you're going to see as we discuss in-text citations is that there's always a correlation between the in-text citation and what's on the works cited page. So this would correlate to this. So if my audience got to this sentence in my essay and they're like, you know, I want to read a little bit more about what Adam said, they would flip back to my works cited page and they would be able to locate the source on the works cited page. Again, that's how we alphabetize and use a hanging indent, so it's easier for our audiences to find the sources when they look at them. And then they could go to either the URL listed, or they could use the publication information listed to look it up on a database or find it on Amazon, wherever they need it. Also, with in-text citations, another thing to remember is you need to use an in-text citation. So you need to cite whenever you have information that is not common knowledge. Now, this one's a little difficult because sometimes it's kind of hard to tell what is and isn't common knowledge. The saying here is when in doubt, cite. So for instance, if you are writing about a particular video game and you've played this game for the last decade, you know how many people play worldwide, you know how many iterations of the game there are, how many characters there are, etc. And you put that information in your essay, you have to go find a source that says it and cite from that source, because that's not something that most people would know. And you would have picked it up from somewhere at some point. It's just been a while. So that's why you'd want to do that kind of specialized knowledge. You want to cite within your essay, and that just lends credibility to your work. So remember those three things. Always provide an in-text citation after you quote, after you paraphrase, and when you have information in your essay that is not common knowledge. Make sure with quotations, remember, I'm going to jot this under here, no more than 30% of your essay can be quoted material. This is written in your textbook as well, but if you have more than 30% quoted material, even if it's properly quoted, even if it's properly cited, that essay kind of ceases to be something original from you, and it starts to become just a patchwork of quotations. And that's not what we're really looking for when we write a unique essay. So we are using evidence to support your claims and your points, but we don't necessarily want to use so much quoted material that it overtakes your own wording. Now, paraphrases, there's not really a limit there. So if you find that you have a lot of quotations, sometimes you can go back and just paraphrase those and get yourself under that 30% mark. Now, let's talk about, we've talked about what they are. Now let's talk about how to do an in-text citation. So in MLA, and you can see this in your textbook as well, there are only 4 real ways that you're going to have an in-text citation. So I'm going to list that here. And like I just alluded to, the in-text citation, as you're going to see, is always going to correlate with what comes first in the works cited entry so that our audience is able to match it up. In your essays, if your in-text citations do not properly match your works cited entries, you won't get credit for having used that source. They need to be easily located and they need to match. So you have to go in this order that I'm going to go over. So if you have an author and page numbers, then your citation would be that author's last name and the page number. And the page number here we're talking about is the page on which you found the information you're quoting or paraphrasing. So for instance, I could have Rogers 3, and that tells me that the information was from Rogers' source from page 3. Okay. Now, if your source had 2 authors, you would just separate them with an and. So let's say it's Rogers and Jones. It would look like this. And let me do this so we'll all get on one line. And if you have 3 or more authors, it would just be Rogers et al. So ET space AL period space, and then the page number. That just means Rogers and others. Okay. So let's say you have a source that has an author, but no page numbers. It would just be the author's last name. So it would just be Rogers. And the same thing would be true here, only that page number would be omitted. So the citation would look like this. And you can tell how many authors you have by looking at your works cited entry. So for instance, the one I have highlighted over here, that one has 2 authors. Okay. Let's say you have a source with no author, but it does have page numbers. If that's the case, it's going to be the title and the page. So it may be the common cold 3. Now, if you have a title that's longer than 3 words, just use the first 3 words of the title. So if the title is the effects of the common cold, it would be the effects of, and then the page number. And lastly, you can kind of sense a pattern here. So let's say you have no author and no page numbers. It would just be the title. So essentially what we have here with the page numbers deleted. Now you'll notice when I've got those page numbers, In the ones where they're needed, I don't have P period, no PG period. That's not an option. So in-text citations have to be formatted in a very specific way. So for any source, there is only one right way to do an in-text citation. It's not something where you can be creative or where there's a whole lot of flexibility. So you want to be sure to get it correct. And if you ever have a question about in-text citations, you can check your textbook, but you can also email me. So with what you have right now, if you have an in-text citation, or if you have a works cited page, what I always recommend that people do is either on a scrap sheet, on a printed version of their works cited page, or if they have printed versions of their sources, go ahead and figure out how to do in-text citations for each of your sources. And that's going to make your life a lot easier, because as you write your essay, you don't have to completely stop, figure out how to do an in-text citation and put it in. Instead, it'll just be right there. So as you use a source, you can plop your citation in and keep writing. Now, that being said, before I kind of do some examples here, always cite as you go. If there's one thing I would emphasize with research, this is it. Do not write an entire essay with no in-text citations and then try to go and put them back in. You're really opening yourself up for some accidental plagiarism there. So always cite as you go. So if I have the works cited page on the left side of the screen, this is what my in-text citations would look like. You're not actually going to type yours down at the bottom, but I just want to show you. So for that first source, it's going to be Adams, and that source does not have page numbers. Typically, you'll see a page range, or you'll know if it has page numbers because you can look at a PDF in front of you or a copy of a book. This is a website. Typically, websites do not have page numbers. You would not want to use the page numbers that appear when you print. So if it says like page 1 of 2, page 2 of 2, not those. We're talking about actual page numbers that would appear on a PDF or in a book. The next one would be Alonzo is the last name, and Margot. And that one does have page numbers. So I'm just going to put a placeholder there. I can see the page range listed. So I would just choose the page from which I found the quote or the paraphrase. The next one is pretty similar to the one above, only it does not have page numbers. It is Bernstein and Smith. The next one is Hoff. Now that's a book, so it's probably going to have page numbers. You can use, again, you can look at it in front of you and see if there are page numbers. That's really what you want to go by. The last one is Langhammer. And it does have page numbers. I see a page range right there in the works cited entry. So if you have that with you as you write, and if you find new sources, just go ahead, do your works cited entry, figure out the in-text citation before you start writing. If you have that, it makes it a lot easier, because again, if you have this source open and in front of you, you quote from it, all you have to do without thinking is just put Adams in there. And it's a lot easier, again, than having to stop everything that you're doing. Remember, a failure to include in-text citations in your essay will result in a maximum grade of 50%. So you do want to make sure that you have a good handle on both what in-text citations are and how to do them. Please do not be afraid to ask questions. And remember, we do offer free tutoring. So if you would rather work with a tutor, that's completely fine. Just be sure to sign up in a timely manner. I hope that you all have a wonderful day. Again, feel free to rewatch this video, save it, whatever is needed. You can refer back to it throughout the course of the semester, since we will be using this for a while. I hope you all have a great day.